everyone. Thank you all for joining our half-hour huddle on protecting commercial tenants in the age of coronavirus. My name is Tia, and I work at the Sustainable Economies Law Center. We're working to cultivate a new legal landscape that supports community resilience and grassroots economic empowerment. We're co-hosting this event with the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. We've partnered with them to create a fair and just commercial lease agreement that everyone can understand. The idea is that it would be easier for commercial tenants to negotiate favorable lease terms with their landlords if they actually understood what was on the lease. So many of you originally RSVP'd to this event thinking it would be a day-long in-person DACA-palooza in which we'd come together to work on creating a commercial lease template for the people. But then the coronavirus happened, and so we had to switch gears and turn this into a teach-in about how we can keep our favorite co-ops, cafes, bookstores, karaoke bars, and other enterprises rooted in this community. Thank you for your patience and for still coming even though we changed the whole event. For anyone who wants to stay afterward, we'll be seeking volunteers willing to dedicate anywhere from 3 to 20 hours each in the coming months to continue to gather and update resources, since resources are changing and being updated every day. After this presentation, we'll hear about volunteer interest, divvy up tasks, and make plans to follow up. If you can't stay for the extra 15 minutes, please email me at tia@theselk.org. For now, Tobias has volunteered to do all of the research for this teach-in. He's a staff attorney of LCCR's Legal Services for Entrepreneurs program. They provide transactional legal services to small businesses, particularly serving communities of color. Feel free to type in your questions in the chat box during the presentation. There'll be a Q&A portion at the end, and I'll relay your questions to Tobias. Like Janelle said earlier, this is being recorded, so please use your discretion when you ask your questions. And before turning it over to Tobias, Janelle is going to go over some disclaimers.
Yes, and Tobias, yes, thanks for going to that slide. So the slides that you all are about to see, a bunch of them have little icons in the corner, and that's to help you all figure out if you want to plug in and contribute. So this is an experiment in collaboration and creating resources on the fly as things change every day. So keep an eye out for these icons if you want to think about ways that you can contribute, and then consider staying for a few minutes afterwards so that we can coordinate. Next slide. This is where, we're lawyers. We always have to do this stuff, right? This is the part where we say, this is not legal advice, and also, this is a resource that we're creating that could be getting updated every day. And it's also, new laws are being written as we speak, and sometimes we don't know how those laws should be interpreted, and so there could actually be information in this slideshow that's currently wrong or that will be wrong in the future. And so this is the part where we just say, proceed with caution, do some of your own research where you can, get advice where you can, because not everything in here is always going to be up to date or even correct. So we can go on now that that's done. Take it away, Tobias.
Thank you, Janelle and Tia, and thank you for inviting me to do this teach-in. As Tia said, I'm the staff attorney for Legal Services for Entrepreneurs at Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. And I just wanted to talk a little bit today about the resources available to commercial tenants, and as well as ways that you can advocate for commercial tenants in this crisis, and some of the laws that cities have passed so far in the San Francisco Bay Area. So first of all, I'll say a little bit about where commercial tenants can get advice. We have our Legal Services for Entrepreneurs program at Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights provides support for small businesses in the Bay Area who can't afford to hire a lawyer. Currently, we do that in two ways. We have online legal clinics, and the link to the calendar is in the presentation. That's our upcoming events calendar, where you can find more information about how to register for a specific legal clinic, and how to attend the legal clinic on the date and time when it's specified in the calendar. And our online legal clinics are open to all small businesses, and you can meet with an attorney virtually on Zoom in that clinic for up to an hour to answer any questions that you or the person attending can meet with an attorney to virtually to answer any questions they might have, including around their commercial lease. Then we also have a program called our Volunteer Attorney Matching Program. And normally this program matches people with volunteer attorneys for longer term assistance, like longer than just an hour. But right now we have a rapid response pipeline set up with a local law firm where they've devoted their real estate attorneys to helping small businesses who need commercial lease advice. And they've committed to providing a 1-hour consultation, including lease review to each small business client that we refer to them. So the way to access that is to fill out our application for legal services online. The link is in the presentation, and I can also put it in the chat box if that's easier. Then there's also the Sustainable Economies Law Centers, legal cafes, which you can sign up for online, or any small business can sign up for online. I don't know if Janelle or Tia, you want to talk about any eligibility criteria or like the type of business that might be best suited for that resource.
Sure, we mostly focus on cooperatives, housing cooperatives, land trusts, and nonprofits that are democratically run. But we also encourage anybody who is Black, Indigenous, or people of color or low-income communities to come to our legal cafes. And our next one, the next few ones are sold out. The next open one is one specifically about mutual aid, and that is on April 28th.
Nice, that's very interesting. Thank you, Tia. We also have, we also listed the East Bay Community Law Center's Community Economic Justice Clinic, and have a link to that up on this slide, as well as Start Small, Think Big, which has a similar volunteer attorney matching program to ours at Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. And the link to their website where you can find the application for services is on this slide as well. Next, we wanted to talk a little bit about talking points that small business commercial tenants can mention in their letters to their landlord about not being able to pay rent. So we have some template letters available that we can send out to folks or provide links to in the chat box or after the presentation. But I just wanted to go over some talking points that you can include in the letters. And each letter will be very specific to the circumstances, of course, but in general, it's good to mention in the beginning that we're in the midst of a global pandemic, and then any government orders that are affecting the business, like a shelter-in-place order. And then it's good to provide as much detail as possible about the business's inability to pay full rent, the full rent that's due, and then the reasons for that. For example, business closure, reduced hours in operations, reduced revenue. Then, if applicable, it's good also to mention the expectation that the business has to reopen as soon as possible. And if applicable, especially for smaller landlords, it's good for the business to confirm their awareness of the financial pain that the landlord is experiencing due to not being able to receive as much rent as they're expecting and fulfilling their own financial obligations. And, if applicable, the small business can feel free to mention their willingness to advocate for mortgage freeze or other, like a property tax deferment or other policies that would benefit small landlords who really depend on rent to make ends meet for themselves. So here are some, and it's a work in progress, as you can see, here are some sample letters to that can be adapted for commercial tenants. The sample letter is for a residential landlord, and it's from Strategic Actions from a Justice Economy. And then norent.org also has a tool for drafting a letter, which I think is automated. So that's pretty cool, but it's also residential focused and could be adapted to commercial tenants. But again, this is a work in progress, so we welcome anyone else who has template letters to post them on this slide. Yes, and small correction to what I said earlier, we'd like to post the links to the template letters on this slide and not in the chat box. Just to go over quickly some strategies for negotiating rent that we know of, and again, we'd welcome anyone else's input based on their experience or what they think would work best. First, the tenant can advocate to postpone the payment of rent due until a future mutually agreed upon date with the landlord. And then if necessary for the tenant's continued financial well-being, the tenant could also ask for a decrease in the rent due for 1 or more months by a certain percentage. And this is sort of like a shared pain kind of approach where the landlord and the tenant agree to share the pain of the overall economic damage that's been done by the COVID-19 situation, where the landlord agrees to absorb some of the lost rent, and then the tenant agrees to pay another share, like a share of it back in the future. But in this scenario, the landlord agrees to just eat some of the rent that they would otherwise have received if this situation hadn't happened. Another way to negotiate is to offer to give the landlord a percentage of net revenue, i.e. revenue after other expenses have been subtracted already, instead of the monthly rent that was due under the lease. Some businesses will have already had this as an arrangement, like especially restaurants tend to have percentage leases where they pay a certain percentage of their rent or of their revenue as the rent. But if you don't have this as an arrangement already, you can offer to pay a percentage of your net revenue instead of the normal monthly rent. You could also offer to pay the rent that's due through a payment plan so that you can defer payments. And finally, you can offer to help the landlord advocate to politicians for a freeze on mortgage payments, as I said previously. In terms of advocating for better public policies, this is an area that needs more research, and we'd welcome anyone who wants to volunteer to provide more information on how advocates for commercial tenants can advocate for better policies, especially in the current situation. I just put up a few or a couple of ways here. The first one is to tell Governor Newsom that small businesses and residential tenants need a statewide eviction moratorium and a statewide rent freeze. Current eviction moratoriums have not actually frozen the rent. So as I'll say later, when I go over the eviction moratoriums, there's a real lack of awareness that many tenants just won't be able to pay the rent once the eviction moratorium is lifted, even though that's what's expected of them once the moratorium is lifted. So a lot of tenant advocates are calling for a rent freeze right now. And Governor Newsom needs to hear as many voices as possible. The other way that you can advocate for better public policies is to encourage legislators to join the National Coalition to freeze rents and mortgages. This is something that I've heard about by following San Francisco Supervisor Matt Haney, who recently, together with his fellow supervisor Hillary Ronan, held a press conference online with city council members and other politicians across the United States calling for a rent cancellation and mortgage moratorium immediately. Finally, there are some links here about, or not finally, sorry. In addition, there are some links here about, with information about buying your building, which may be an option for businesses who can organize the funds to do this. I don't know if Janelle or Tia, you want to say anything more about this?
You know what, since it's already 11:18, I would suggest that we move down to the part where you talk about the moratoriums and some of the details, and folks have these slides so they can come back and learn
Oh,
more.
sure. Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, so just very quickly to go over the city laws that protect commercial tenants. There's a great NOLO article on residential and commercial eviction moratoriums across California that was updated on April 1st. The details that we've provided on the eviction moratoriums to date in these slides are about San Francisco, Oakland, San Leandro, and Berkeley. Oh, and I'm sorry, I should have changed that. For Oakland, it actually passed on March 27th. It's not just a proposed moratorium. So for San Francisco, the main points to remember are that it only lasts for 30 days, but it can be extended. So 30 days from March 17th, but it can be extended. It protects commercial businesses, commercial tenants with a San Francisco business license and less than $25 million in 2019 gross receipts. And it includes month-to-month and holdover tenants. So that's a great protection. And then another important thing to remember is that the landlord has to provide notice to the tenant of failure to make a rent payment. And it's not the tenant who first has to provide notice to the landlord, as in some of the residential eviction moratoriums that have been passed to date. The Oakland City Ordinance that was passed on March 27th regarding commercial eviction moratorium applies to small businesses and to nonprofits explicitly. It provides an absolute defense in an eviction proceeding based on non-payment of rent if it's related to a decrease caused by COVID-19 or a related government response, and remains in effect until May 31st, 2020, which is great. And then also landlords are required to give commercial tenants notice of this law in any notice that they give to a tenant demanding rent during while the ordinance is still in effect. San Leandro also passed a similar ordinance. I'm not going to go over the details. You can read them here just because we're running out of time. And then Berkeley also passed a similar ordinance. And we have space on the slides, of course, to add other cities. I think there's no, as far as we know, there's no statewide commercial eviction moratorium right now. So right now it's going to remain sort of like a patchwork of different city laws, as you can see in the NOLO article that I mentioned. So any information that folks could add on other cities would be here in the slideshow would be great. And that's it. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Tobias. And we're inviting people to ask questions now. You can unmute yourselves or you can type it into the chat. One thing that I'm not clear on, Tobias, is are tenants going to have to down the road make up the missed rent payments, or is that kind of unclear?
Yes, in the eviction moratorium legislation or orders that I've read, there's no provision that excuses tenants from paying from or forgives tenants the missed rent payments, so that they are going to have to make up their missed rent payments once the moratoriums are lifted in order to um, avoid being evicted. However, I think some of the moratoriums may provide, I think, like, for example, let me just make sure. Some of the moratoriums do provide for a 6-month period after the moratorium is lifted to pay the rent due back. Oh yeah, like in San Leandro, it says tenants have 120 days to pay back the rent.
Got it.
Yeah.
So it seems like another policy we could advocate for is excusal of rent, or the pain sharing, as you called it, I think,
right.
reducing the rent.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I think that's actually what rent freeze is referring to. So like when people use the hashtag rent freeze 2020 or rent freeze on Twitter, that's what they're referring to. Like they just, or cancel rent. That's what they're advocating for, is to just like excuse tenants from paying rent while these moratoriums are in effect.
Got it.
Or like during this national emergency period.
I see a question from Ricardo in the chat. If nothing changes in the case for Oakland, for example, on or after May 31st, landlords can demand rent and serve an unlawful detainer for non-payments during the shelter-in-place orders, ? So it seems like after May 31st, are there just going to be a lot of unlawful detainer actions filed by landlords?
Oh, well, presumably, I mean, my guess would be the Oakland City Council would extend the moratorium in line with any shelter-in-place order.
Oh, great. And Seema just shared a resource in the chat with some good Q&A on Oakland's moratorium.
Oh, great. Thank you, Seema.
Yeah, and folks, if you see that green icon in the corner on these slides, it means that the story is not finished on any of these. It means we need to keep paying attention, see what the developments are, see how the city interprets it, find out what the processes are that people need to use. That's why people helping stay on top of each city's developments will be really helpful. Other questions?
Jasmine from ABCLC actually also asked a question above Ricardo. It says, have you started reviewing the Federal CARES Act?
I personally have not had time to, but my colleagues have. Is there anything specific, or maybe we could, is there anything specific that we could, that you think we could include in this, Jasmine? Like in any specific provision of the CARES Act?
Sorry, I'll unmute myself since it's easier to talk. No, I was just wondering, we're starting to review it here at EBCLC and just hoping to coordinate research since We're hoping to identify, pathways in the act to help or to assist and serve our clients.
Mhm. Yeah, I think if you want to contact Sushil at my organization, he's the one who's reviewing that. So he would probably be open to talking with you about coordinating research. And that's Sushil Jacob for anyone who doesn't know.
I do know a lot of businesses, cooperatives, nonprofits are today, as we speak, also texting me as they fill out their applications for the Paycheck Protection Program. I think I'm saying it right. The PPP, also known as the 7A loans. And I think some of the money for that can be used to help people pay rent, commercial tenants pay rent.
Mm.
And it's a very easy application process. I kind of feel like most businesses should seriously consider it. It's a forgivable loan, supposedly.
Oh, and then I just wanted to add that LCCR is trying to coordinate another kind of rapid response pipeline for attorney assistance around loan applications. So be on the lookout for that soon. And if you have any clients who want to apply for that, they can fill out our legal services for entrepreneurs online application, which now includes a field under legal services requested for loan assistance specifically.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we'll hit one more question. Erica put in a good question of what do you recommend for tenants who are being asked to sign a contract that outlines a payment plan or a timeline, knowing that cities or counties may provide better protections or a longer timeline in the coming weeks?
Mm-hmm. That's a tough one. I think it really depends on the relationship with the landlord and also what you know about the city government. I think some city governments don't really have the political will to provide better protections to commercial tenants, unfortunately. So if you're in that kind of city, then it's probably best to try to negotiate a payment plan with your landlord. I guess you could always incorporate a clause into the payment plan contract that if the local city government or the state government for that matter provides for better protections for commercial tenants, then those protections would apply instead of the payment plan that you agreed to. Getting the landlord to agree to that would be another matter. The other option would just be wait and see and like tell the landlord, I want to wait and see what the city government comes out with in the coming couple of weeks, and let's set a date to reconvene and restart discussions about this. The landlord may actually agree to that, or they may just say, you know what, forget it. This is take it or leave it, and if you want to leave it, then that's fine, but you won't get the protection of our payment plan, and it's off the table. So they may try to be hard-nosed and in that respect, and just pressure you to agree to something right now. That's why I was saying it all depends on the landlord, in addition to what the city you're in might do. You could also contact whoever your representative is in the city government and ask if they know whether there is anything in the pipeline, or like whether what their take on the political will barometer is, so to speak, of better tenant protections in the coming weeks. I bet you want to if your city council member or supervisor or whoever it is, like if they don't speak with you themselves, then like someone in their office, like a legislative aide, would probably be willing to speak with you about that.
Yeah, that's good advice. Since we're at the half hour of our half-hour huddle, I am about to stop the recording. I want to welcome people to drop off, except for those of you who are interested in continuing to collaborate and pull together resources, add to this slideshow, or collaborate in any other way. Please stay on, unmute yourselves, maybe turn on your video so we can have a little 15 minutes of debrief and next steps. But otherwise, I really want to thank Tobias for all that clear information gathering, breaking it down for us. So thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Toby.
you.